give us the update, and I think he's going to introduce the staff. I see them all standing in the back of the room. Okay.
I will introduce my staff, but first, how many of you were in school-related positions in 2003? The first year of SACE. How did we fund your sudden growth for 2003? She's very close. We asked you what your number was, and we paid you sudden growth based on what you told us your ADM was. That was after a year of implementation. We've been in business. When did we do your statewide recalculation for fiscal year 2003? It was in May of 2015, 2 years after the fact. We are exponentially ahead of that. I can't emphasize how much we are ahead of that SACE fiasco. I'd like to just, well, anyway. And to further support that just a little bit, the ADM that we just calculated this February is 1.4% less than the 2015 ADM. So we are very close with 40th day ADM. We had, a couple of years ago, districts declined by 1.34% in their 100th day ADM. I mean, we're kind of at the same spot. I'm expecting that 1.4% decline to move above zero, but we are very close. IT has made, like they said before, are continuing to fix things. I panicked a month ago, early January time frame, because sped counts were horrendous, to say the least. They implemented a fix and said everything's good. And I said, we're not rolling any more charters. I said, we can't transition charters with this. With the data looking like it was. But they had a fix, they told me it was implemented, and I said, I gotta see it to believe it. So they copied production to a UAT environment, they ran the aggregation, and there were unbelievable improvements to sped counts. I love spreadsheets, so I've got one. I can go in and I can put Alhambra's entity IED in, and I can see what it was in 2015, 2016, Mesa's, Sequoia Choice, EdKey, Vail, even Vail's looked a lot better. They all gained, we had one or two that their ADM, their sped count dropped a little bit, but I just clicked through, waited for it to calculate. It is kind of a big file, and they lined up really nicely with 2014 or greater in most cases. I had a different variation to compare the January processing to that UAT environment at that point in time. So I said, let's go ahead and start transitioning. But then we came to realize that school of finance isn't the only one that uses that data. Got to be nice to the others. We try to play well with them. And they had the concerns like was indicated earlier about the October 1 enrollment. So we delayed the transition for another month. But I'm really liking the numbers that I'm seeing. They're jumping ahead, at least for this month. The next correction might only be 10 kids, but the one after that could be 1,000 or a couple thousand. That 1.4% decline from 2015 represents about 13,000 kids out of 1.2 million. Let me rephrase that. That 13,000 out of a million school district kids. So talking about charter schools, their ADM is growing. So no matter what you hear, there's problems and so forth. Charter school counts have increased. 40th-day ADM has increased by over 4% with the data that we have right now. So things are working. I'm going to go a little farther. There was a slide up here earlier that lists all the vendors. I've got that in Excel. I've got that. IT shared that with me. And like I said before, I like Excel. I added the 2015 ADM, the 2016 ADM, and the majority of LEAs that are on submitting to AZEDs are very close to their 2015 numbers or greater than their 2015 numbers. So things are working. They're not as bad as I hear they are. At least not in my opinion, they're not that bad. That being said, I would like to now introduce my staff. I guess I only have one staff here. She has 4 staff. So if Saba and the account analyst, they're not a singing group, would come forward. And I want those other 2 back there to come forward also. This is Saba. She says she's allergic to microphones. So I'm not going to ask her to say anything today. Next time, yes. But she has jumped in. She has taken over. She's doing a very good job. Next to her, we have Kristen, one of the account managers. Monica, the new mother. Barbara. And Jim. So they are an awesome team. They have been working hard on your guidelines, the school finance manual, in addition to EX that we're going to talk about in a little bit. EX1? I can't keep the numbers straight, I'm sorry. But anyway, well, I just wanted to introduce them. I'll talk about them later. They'll still be here, though I won't say anything that I don't think they'll like. Over here, typically these guys are not looked on positively. They're part of our audit resolution group. This is Matt and Melissa. We do work together very closely, and I do want to tell you that they try very hard to take as little of your money as possible. They even give you money sometimes. But we do work very closely with them to make sure that if a new scenario comes up and so forth, that we agree on how that new scenario should be implemented. Believe it or not, I've been here in school finance since '96, and I still find new scenarios that pop up. So they do happen. This one bothers me more than the other, but I'm okay with that. Literally bothers me. He comes to my office. But anyway, thank you for being here. So I thought that would take a half an hour. I thought I really had a couple hours worth to talk about here. EX1, what would you like to ask about for EX1? I know it's one of the things I was asked to talk about. I remember it now. I didn't remember it yesterday. Like I mentioned before, they are working on the school finance guideline. It is very close. Very close. Saba has taken that on as a more or less a challenge to get it done for you folks, and so that we can get that out for you. We did change EX1. This is excused absences. We did clarify by putting it in a different sentence Absences due to out-of-state, out-of-school suspension shall be reported as unexcused when the total number of absences for all reasons include 10%. Kid goes to a doctor, excused, parent notified you, kid's sick, kid goes to a dentist. If your policy allows vacations to be excused, that's fine, there's no 10% for those, but if you suspend a student out of school, you include those absences when determining the 10%, and when you get beyond 18 days, if you're on a 180-day calendar, those absences become unexcused.
Only out of school suspension. Only suspension.
Only out of school suspension.
So now you're suspended, say the second week of school for your 10 days, and then you get 18 absences after. We don't have to go back, correct?
We're not expecting you to go back.
What was the question?
The question is, if you suspend a student on the 5th day of school, he's out for 15 days, 5 days, whatever it is, but he incurs absences subsequent to the suspension, don't go back. If he incurs 18 legitimately excused absences, don't go back to that first suspension in the first part of the year. Leave it as it was at that point in time.
As excused.
As excused.
So now he really has more than 18 absences.
You could have, yeah. So, but if he gets suspended again, he's beyond the 18%, and that suspension would be
So let me
unexcused.
just clarify. You don't, if your suspensions are excused,
If your suspensions are excused and you're within the 18 days or 10%, those suspensions are part of those 18 days.
Yes.
What do you mean don't go back?
Well, you reported Johnny as absent. What would I do without my staff? Well, I was talking to her.
That's okay, Lyle. You want to go outside? We'll visit out there.
Am I safe? So, Johnny's reported absent for days 5 through 15. It's not more than 10%. You report him as excused. When he incurs additional absences and they begin to accumulate, and you're getting to 17, 18, 19, 30 excused absences, don't go back and change those for the first suspension.
okay, gotcha.
But if he's suspended again,
Now, you just said in your explanation, vacations. So personal absences, they're not sick, it's not bereavement, it's not out, you mentioned personal. But yet in your guideline, nothing is said about any personal other than family vacations. Aunt Martha's in town and she hasn't been here for 10 years, I'm gonna let my kids stay with her. Is that excused or unexcused?
I'm going to ask my staff if I remembered an old version. Because I thought we had a memo that we delegated vacations to the...
Well, vacation, but we have like huge instances of parents just calling in and saying, I want my child excused. And
Just for whatever
they don't want
reason,
to
valid
give
or
a reason,
unvalid.
yeah. And it doesn't fall under like the definition. So are we reading this to be, these are examples of excused absences, or these are the only excused absences?
Isn't there,
Personally, I would like there to have to be a reason, but I don't know that how easily it would be to find statutory backup to support giving you those kind of instructions. It's definitely something I would like to make a note of and look at for you. Saba just indicated she made the note.
I mean, if you've got a 3,000 student high school with an attendance line, and you've got 500 parents calling into the attendance line just saying, please excuse my child today.
Are those purporting to be parents?
Yeah. That's a whole different issue.
Do you follow up on those calls where you get a couple hundred a day at that
If they
store?
sound like they're 12, yes.
Okay, but if they sound like an adult?
An adult, no.
I mean, we don't have enough time to write those kind of guidelines that detailed. But we'll talk about for whatever reason, excuse,
yeah.
and may or may not amend that. This guideline, no matter what, that will probably occur after we issue the SF user manual. Anything else?
When does this go into effect?
Your website says this fiscal year.
Back to July 1, 7/1/2000. Yell a little louder. I discussed with others July 1 of this fiscal year, so 6 months ago, 7, 8 months ago, basically.
So this fiscal year
Yes.
is in effect.
Yes. Should we put an effective date on this? Saba, can we put an effective date? She's got it. Bob?
I'm simply going to say, I hope I'm speaking to the audience here, that when you put out a guideline in December and you make it effective July 1st of that year, that is a hardship that needs to be avoided going forward, please.
And that is what we're working on, and that is what Saba is trying to get done.
Will the auditors be notified of this, that come in and audit, to take care of these in January, to go back and clean up a whole semester has been difficult. So will all the auditing people need a little leeway?
Okay. I have discussed it with audit resolution in the past July 1, this fiscal year. Matt is here from audit resolution, and we'll make sure, I don't know that we have a list of all the auditing companies, but we'll share it with the Auditor General's office and see what we can get out there for you. Yes?
So I just want to clarify a scenario that we were kicking around here. Oh, okay. So I want to be clear that if I have a student who has already accumulated at some point in the school year 10% of my school year, and then we suspend them for 10 days, those out-of-school suspensions right now I've got coded as excused absences. Are they, should they be excused or should they be unexcused, given that the kid is hit the 10% earlier in the school year? And that's not a contiguous absence.
And then at that point, it's 10 unexcused, and we have to withdraw him.
Yes.
Because I thought you just told Patty that she doesn't have to go back and count the other, so that's why I'm confused. So I hear what you're saying, that's what I expected your answer to be, but then you answered Patty, and I was like, okay, now I'm confused.
At the time of the out-of-school suspension, the student began with 0 absences. The only absences that had occurred at that point in time were the 10, maybe 15, whatever it is, 5 days that resulted from out-of-school suspension.
But once he gets that 10%, anything coming, if he's suspended again, those are now unexcused. And if it's a 10-day suspension, all 10 days are unexcused, and we have to withdraw him.
The W-4.
Yes. I don't know what the code is for.
It's a W-4.
I just want the codes, I don't care.
So
2 months.
now we're withdrawing back to his last day in class, or his
Okay.
attendance doesn't show the suspension.
Okay, anything additional on EX1?
Oh, we do, but
I see a hand. Yes.
Okay, I'm still confused on this A because I don't see anything about the 18 days that we also have in it where we change it to unexcused if they have more than 18 excused suspensions. So I'm confused between the 18 days and the 10% and how they work together.
The 18 days came from an assumed 180-day calendar. If you have a 4-day school week, that might kick in at 14.4 days, or I'm not sure we care about rounding.
So are you saying that the 18%, the 10% is replacing the wording, the 18 days is obsolete now? Is that what you're saying?
It was just, 18 days was just an example. It's 10% of your instructional
Okay,
days.
so
for
it
that
is
school.
obsolete, so I can, thank you.
Over here, I saw that hand first.
Is this based on specific student membership? So let's say a student enters 2 weeks ago. Would that be they are only allowed 9 days?
You know, I haven't had that question before, but I think 10% of the instructional days for the school calendar. So if he enrolls on the 162nd day and is suspended for everything else, he would exceed 10%. Oh, I didn't. I shouldn't have said that. Maybe it confused. Lady behind you, sir.
When do you think you'll have the FTE written out? Because our student information system, right, FTE is provided, right?
Did we include that in the SF manual? When will we be issuing the FTE guidance? And I think I saw someone shake their head that it is included in the SF user manual that we hope to have out, but I don't want to say by the end of this month, but that's what I've been told.
You can say by the end of the month.
I can say by the end of this month. Thank you, Saba. Yes.
Part of the audit this year, and is this information going to be given to our outside auditors so they will audit this stuff?
We are going to share it with the auditor, make sure the Auditor General's office are aware of it. We're going to add an effective date for that, which I would hope would be enough for the auditors, but we'll share it with whatever auditors we can communicate with. But I don't have a list of all your auditors.
But it is effective as of July 1st.
Yes, yes.
Oh, 2015.
July 1, 2015.
So we have to go back.
Well, you don't have to. You can. You can leave them as... Oh, wait a minute. If you've had suspensions prior, yes. Yes. I'm not... I forgot that in some scenarios, there was a different implementation in some of the districts than in other districts. In the back.
So you have a situation where a student has accrued a bunch of absences, gets suspended, the suspension, 10 unexcused consecutive absences, so you withdraw. Then they we're gonna re-enter the kid. So then those suspension days don't count towards a future suspension accumulation of days. So those days are basically wiped out if it causes a withdrawal.
You know, we've talked about that question, and we've talked about it, and we've talked about it. Did we come up with an answer?
What's already happened?
Yeah, it just wiped out truancy too.
Well, I'm not sure it did, but
In the vendor file.
in the vendor file it does. Is that the same for all vendor files, vendors? It basically starts anew, wipes the slate clean. Well, I'm not going to be overly eager to go back and tell you something different than what your vendor is doing right now with wiping that slate clean for that student.
Lyle, the logic there is if we don't show that the student is enrolled, we can't accrue attendance, right? So it has to. It has to say, okay, well, they were only here then till this date. And then they can't accrue attendance if they're not enrolled. So that's the logic. That's why they do that. So, yeah, so.
I guess we need to make something in writing one way or the other for that no matter what.
We will do it. Help us help you.
Lyle, what happened to our school finance committee?
The school finance committee hasn't been met since, I think, one or two.
One.
Did we meet twice? No.
One.
But I believe all those concerns that were addressed, there were a few things that we didn't get to. I know I have my notes from that meeting. Jim probably has his.
So was the committee going to review the guide before it goes public?
What do you want? You want the committee to review?
That was the point.
Thank you, Brian.
So,
I'm not gonna ask for a lot of forbearance, but if you send me a list, I will work with the committee.
Yeah.
while she's making that note? Yes.
On your ADE audits, when they do come and it says excuse, do we have to have proof, like the OSS documentation, that doctors note that the student has gone? You know, it says excuse, or are they going to take our student management system where it doesn't equal, is that good enough?
This is a question for Matt and Melissa. So when you go out and look at, what district are you with? When you go out and look at Phoenix Union, and San Carlos, okay, and they have a student marked as excused, do they have to say the doctor's note? Or an indication that the parent called in, a note, or what? The question is, what kind of documentation is needed for an excused absences, for audit purposes, for a medical excuse, or for out-of-school suspension?
Why the change? Why are we now all of a sudden changing from excused to unexcused? I thought it was a school or district discretion on what was excused.
Do you want to get back on that question and share it with Annette so she can get it out? I think I saw a head shake, yes.
Here's the biggest thing we run into, is that anything that ends up getting published in general, we're unfortunately somewhat of the enforcement of it. So we've got to read the black and white and see what it says. believe it or not, EX1, the revision, is actually working to the benefit. Now what it's saying is only out-of-school suspensions will be converted from excused to unexcused going forward. Originally, it didn't have that stipulation. So anything that wasn't an illness or chronic syndrome or any of the other protected elements could be converted. One of the challenges we run into is that we will have an LEA that says, mom called in. Well, that goes on for 30 days.